Okay. Oh, Sarah, I thought you were removing your picture from the recording. I'm glad you're back.
No, I got it. You have
Okay.
to get it.
Thank you. May I make one of you co-host?
Sure.
Yes.
I'll make you both co-hosts. Okay. Thank you. I don't expect we'll get cut off this morning, but you never know. Okay. Welcome. So this is, and maybe people might join throughout, that's okay, but this is Bonnie's brainchild. This is Bonnie said, you know, we're going to Catalina and I'm expecting I'm going to paint a lot of good things. So can you show me how to make them look nice afterwards, nice and presentable? So I've been thinking about that for a little while. I said, yes, I'll do that in May because that'll be perfect timing. So I'm going to take you guys through almost from start to finish how I make my artwork presentable. And this is geared specifically towards us watercolorists, but you can use a lot of these concepts for other kinds of work that you do. You know, if you work in acrylic or pastel, it's just that it's not specific. So I'm not going to be talking about fixatives for pastel, you know, and that kind of thing, but you can probably garner a little bit, especially in the framing portion. Okay. So if somebody is watching this, or if you're working in a different media, it might be helpful anyway, but this is more specifically for watercolor. And I will talk about, you know, what my standards are. I figured them out almost by myself. So I did not figure them out from watching videos or anything like that. So a little bit of help from my framer and just taking things apart, you know, and working backwards and looking at how things are done. So this isn't necessarily the way everybody does things, but they end up looking just fine. So this and working out for me, I've never had anyone say like, God, that looks jacked up. So who did this for you? You know? So, and the idea for me is time and money, how to save time and money while still making your artwork look beautiful. So whether you are making your artwork look presentable because you are a working artist and you're going to be showcasing it in a show, or you're going to be hanging in a gallery, or you're going to be selling it anywhere, or you're going to be giving it as a gift or even putting it in your own house, all of these would apply. So it's not necessarily, I'm not talking about presenting your artwork professionally, like you need to get yourself an agent so you get into a gallery. That's a whole separate discussion, you know, which I'm sure people will ask me about. And some people probably thought that when they saw, just saw the flyer, you know. But so this is just about making what you've painted look nice so you can put it on the wall or you could sell it. And it's about time and money. So because I'm a working artist, this is my income. So the best I can make something look at the best price means that I can make more money and I can make more art and teach classes and volunteer and do all of that stuff that I do for you guys and for myself, obviously, because I love it. But, you know, in order to be a working artist, you have to be a business person as well. So I can frame something for a third of the cost. And if I can frame it in, you know, not even a third, like an eighth of the time, that means that I don't have to rely on somebody else. And so if you're last minute and you need a gift and you go to your framer and you ask them, can you frame this for me? And they're like, sure, I'll have it ready for you in 3 weeks. That might not be acceptable in the time limit. So, so again, yeah, that's what this is about for me, making things look good for, you know, saving time and saving money. So this is the one workshop where we're not going to paint or draw. So before we start, do you have any questions, anybody, or specific things maybe you want to cover? No, listening. Okay. What about, did anyone bring any artwork that they're having a problem with? Or they maybe want help with? Okay. Okay. Maybe something will come to mind if you've got a break or something like that. Okay, so I will get started. I will have a tip jar at the end. I'll also send out the video link when I upload this video tonight. So if you feel like you got a lot out of it and I'm helping you save millions of dollars, you can certainly feel free to tip me. You guys are always so generous with me, but that'll be at the end, okay? So I'm going to start with this PowerPoint. Can you guys see this? Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, I just thought it might be easier to showcase some of this, and there are certain slides where I can send them out later. Okay, so this is what we're talking about today. So first, we're going to cover how to prep to make sure that it's easier for you to use inexpensive materials and to make it easier in general for the process. Prepping for success. It's just a couple tips, not a whole ton. Some of you guys know this stuff already from being in my classes and workshops. Then I'm going to talk about how I mat something at home, how I package it up, and then how I frame something at home. And I am going to show you, I'm going to frame something right here from start to finish. Okay, and then I'll talk a little bit about making prints, making other things. I know a lot of you guys are curious about that. And then I will, at the end, I will share my resources. So you can feel free to ask me like where did you get that or what is the name of that? And I'm happy to share that, but that will also all be in a slide at the end. Okay. So if you guys want to just go out and buy these things, you'll know where to buy it and what it's called and what size and etc.
Perfect.
Okay. So prepping for success. So let's start with that. So before I start matting or framing, there are things I do beforehand, before I even paint. Okay. So one of those things is to always use the best materials that you can afford. I think it goes without saying, but your prints are your originals are going to last longer. They're going to look better. Your prints are going to look better on better paper. Your paint is going to look better if you use better quality paint. That being said, you can't always afford the best of the best, but you can shop around, you can wait for sales, you can, do all of those things. We all talk about that stuff all the time, right? So the second thing I do is I decide what size I want to work. So not all the time, but when I'm in the studio, for the most part, and a lot of the time when I'm in the field, I think through what size I want to work at. So do I want this to be a standard size painting or a non-standard size painting? Non-standard size paintings could be smaller. They could be larger. They could be longer, a unique size or shape, an oval or a circle. It doesn't mean you can't get something done. It just means it will take more time and money to accomplish those things because standard framing and mat hasn't been created for it, right? But there can be a lot of impact or a lot of reasons why you want to do something super small, super big, round, or, all of those things. So the other thing I do is I use a guide. So you can see me up in the little square. I have several standard size mats that are not brand new, they're dirty. And I have actually written on the side of them, on the other side of them, so there's a front and a back, right? I use beveled mats. So on the back, I will write that it is an 11 by 14 mat with an 8 by 10 opening, but the 8 by 10 opening is never 8 by 10. It's not, it's smaller. So if you measure the opening on an 8 by 10, it's 7.5 by, you can guess, 9.5. So it's a half an inch smaller. Why is that? Because if you're an average Joe, I will say an average dum-dum who's got an 8 by 10 photo and you're going to the store, you're going to be confused if you're looking for an 8 by 10 photo frame and somebody says, well, this is 7 by whatever. So it's for the overlap, isn't it? That's all it is so that you can frame something and it's not like right up against it like this. Okay. Can you guys see this in the little picture? Okay. So that's why there's always a slight overlap. The bigger the mat, the bigger that the difference is. So on an 8 by 10 with a 5 by 7 opening, it's only 1/4 of an inch on either side. Okay. So I write these on the back of my mats because it helps me remember that if I make a print, for example, that is where my image size needs to be. You want your image generally to float in the center of the frame or to fit the frame exactly, okay, the mat or the frame. So we're just talking about matting, which is the first step of the process. So what you want is you want it to line right up. You don't want a little bit of white space like that, and you don't want a whole lot covering it either, because then you might lose the composition. Even if it's a little bit, I'll tell you, when I paint a composition and I get it wrong slightly, it's too big, it drives me crazy because in my brain, I already know that composition was balanced well. And if I have to cut off part of it, usually it makes me nuts. I'm so mad. So I will go for that ½ inch or whatever. I'll go get it and I'll get a custom mat cut because it bothers me because I've seen it in my mind's eye already one way and then it's not going to look that way. So use the old mats as a guide to block out your painting space, right? And make sure you allow for that overlap on the tape. I always say, I got this from TV, you say measure twice, cuss once. So I'm going to just show you really quickly what I mean here on my visualizer, okay? So if I'm getting ready to do a painting, I will use an old mat here and my pencil. By the way, I've got my little toolkit where I keep everything that I need. That's the pop-out drawer. So that's all my framing stuff that sits on the top. I'm in framing mode because I've got 3 shows coming up right now. So this is actually a new mat. I haven't written on the back of it. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and figure out, you know, I can get 2 8x10s out of this picture, but whatever it is, let's just use it here. I will make little tiny dots here. I usually don't draw the whole line, but you could draw the whole line or you could just draw the corners, okay? So let's just draw most of it. And notice I'm using the inside of a mat, especially if you're using a new mat. Don't use the outside because you don't want to get any graphite on your beautiful mat. So see where that pencil line is? So now I've got a guide. So the key for me is that when I put the tape down, I don't want to put the tape right at the outside of that line because that allows for no wiggle room at all, correct? So what I'll do is I will just put it ever so slightly, like 1/8 of an inch, outside that line on all 4 sides. So that gives me a tiny little bit of wiggle room, but not enough that I'm going to go crazy if my composition got cut off, you know, or a beautiful blend of color I did in the corner of a tree got cut off. So I will do that all the way around. And I'll just go slightly outside. And sometimes I'm painting with you guys and I'm in a hurry and I mess it up. So I'm going to show you one where I messed it up, or I measure wrong. So anyway, once I get that all the way across, I think you guys know that for me, it's very important to press the tape down with your finger. Don't do it with a nail or something because that will make an indent. By the way, that wasn't straight, but it'll make an indent in the paper and then the paint will flow into the indent and give you a darker line. Sure, that's happened with some of you guys. So use the soft part of your finger to crease both sides and then you won't have that weird paint flow, which I used to get on my early paintings. So see that? That's because I didn't press down. There's nothing wrong with it. You're going to cover it up with a mat, aren't you? It's not terrible. However, if you're like me and you're taking a photo to show to somebody, it doesn't look super professional. So I've just gotten better about doing that. Okay. So, and then I just take an eraser and I erase that pencil away before I start painting. Okay. You guys do this already?
Can I ask what kind of masking tape you're using? Because the stuff I bought at Lowe's just keeps popping up.
Yeah. Yep. For me, this is just blue painter's tape. I've got a link to it on the last slide.
Oh, okay, good.
And I will send that out with the thank you email tonight with the link so that you guys know where I can get it. I like it because in a pack of 3 sizes and I use all 3 of those sizes. So sometimes I use a thicker tape and sometimes I use the thinner tape. So anyway, then I paint away. I wait for it to dry. I take the tape off. I never on Arches paper have any problem getting this tape off. I also on Arches paper never have problem getting this Scotch tape off. I don't have a problem with either on the Arches paper. However, if you do have a problem, do what we talk about all the time, which is take a hairdryer and just heat up ever so slightly the gum, just heat it up right over the tape and then pull it off and heat it a little more and pull it and heat it a little more. It'll come off with no problems. Okay. So that's what we're gonna do. So then what I do is, and I think I've got a slide to show you about this. Okay, so you can see my finished painting with the tape there. So if you happen to paint to a non-standard size, don't worry about that. We'll fix that later. It just sometimes might cost more time and money, as I mentioned already. But a lot of the time I'll do a sketch in my sketchbook and I'm like, that is very paintable. Like, I mean, that's very like frameable. I really like my sketches now. I used to be insecure about them, but sometimes they're quite beautiful and they show the hand of the artist. And sometimes I want to frame them up. And so they might not be a standard size because I didn't think about it, you know, or maybe you just are painting on a non-standard size paper, or you're out in the field and you do a quick sketch and you feel like, oh, I want to take that one out of my sketchbook. So don't worry about that with originals. I'll show you some tricks of what I do with that. I mean, obviously you could just send it to the framer and have them do it, but I still have a trick for you for that. Okay. So then what I do is I basically will just take the mat and I will then align it here. And here's where you can see that I measured wrong, okay? So I just overlapped my tape a little too much. And unfortunately, I can't use a standard mat for this. Also, you can see I've made the painting too long. So I do lose a bit of that painting. See how this tree got cut off? Whereas if I had it like, it would be like this. So that's the kind of thing that sometimes will bother me. And maybe I'll take it to my framer and get a custom mat because there's no fixing this. And I'm terrible about cutting mats at home. Some of you guys do it. There's other things you can do, right? You can use a floating frame. Has anyone ever used a floating frame for their painting? So you just buy it in a bigger size and you literally just use like double stick tape to stick your painting, the back of it to the back, and you float your picture in like that. So that's something that you can do. So I use this paper cutter, which we were talking about yesterday. And what I would do is I would trim all the edges of my paper. Oh, and backwards. Sorry, trim all the edges just so I don't have a whole lot of paper sticking out. So I'll just trim the edge, you know, ever so slightly, and then line it up the way that you want it. There's no top or bottom with these mats. Just line it up the way you want it. And if it were fitted properly, then I would just turn it over. And then I usually have archival tape, and I'm out of it right now, so I'm waiting on some. But you can use regular tape as well. And I have a pair of scissors somewhere. Wherever my scissors are, I cut, I don't rip because it doesn't look nice. And I just tape 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can tape across the corners. So you can tape like this and have it go across. The idea is you don't want to seal it down or anything, because you want for whoever has this, and even it might be you, to be able to take it off cleanly without damaging it. So let's say somewhere down the line, your mat gets dirty, or you want to reframe things, you want to change a color. You want it to be easy to remove it from the mat. You don't want it to be difficult. So you want to use like as few materials on the back to get it to that point. So just 4 pieces of tape is fine. Now, this came up earlier before we started the record, but I'll say it for posterity. If you have a little bumpy bit like you do right here, it's not going to lay in your frame very nicely. And what you're going to get is you're going to get possibly a little shadow on your artwork where that paper is bumpy. And it's only bumpy from, you know, if you used a lot of water when you're painting, even good paper. So there's a couple things you can do before you mat it up. If you see you've got a bumpy piece of paper, you can see it here. See how bumpy that is. What I do is I iron it. So there's different ways to stretch your paper. but I like to take clean water. I just spritz it. I've got my ironing board set up, and I put a clean piece of paper face down on my ironing board. Then I put this, it'll be a bigger piece of paper normally. Then I put my painting down. I spritz it ever so slightly with water, and on low heat, I iron it flat. And I go from one corner up and out. I'm not going from the middle out generally, but doesn't really matter as long as you kind of try to do as little ironing as necessary. Don't just do like you would do. I don't know how you iron. I do my shirts like willy-nilly, but try to touch it as little as possible. But keep the heat on low and keep it moving so you don't scorch it. And generally it will iron out the bubbles and you'll be fine. The other thing too is you're generally going to be pressing this painting will be between glass or UV plexi and a backing. So if you're framing it, that pressing of it, that squishing of it will help flatten it out. But if it's really wet and bumpy, you can take it to your local frame shop, and your local frame shop will have a stretcher or a press. And so they do this regularly, because if you think about it, they're used to working with like people bring in old photos, old family photos and things like that need restoration. So they've got a bigger tool where they can press it for you. Maybe they'll charge you a few dollars to do it. Something to think about. Okay. So once I've got that taped on the back, then what I'll do is I'll sign it. So I don't sign it generally until I've figured out where my mat is going to go, because I want it to be generally floating, the image to be floating in the frame. So then I can sign it, and generally it'll be over here. Okay. And then I'll show you what it looks like at the end. So I haven't signed this one yet. Still thinking about that. But once I've got that done, and whoever's barking, can you mute for the moment? So once that's done, then I've got a beautiful way of finishing things. And I will take a plain backing board. So I'm going to actually take this off so I could just show you guys. So it's a plain white backing board, and these come in kits. So you can buy these in bulk, you can buy them in onesies, but when you buy like just a single mat at Michael's or something like that, they will not have backing board with it. But I don't usually use Michael's. They will sell backing board, but then you have to cut it yourself. So I buy kits that include the backing board, and they also include the cellophane bag that is resealable. It's great to have it. So I use double stick tape. I use a business card. You could use a sticker or something like that if you want. But I put my artist, I measure it, I center it when I do that. And I'll put that on the back. And then it's not looking nice right now because I didn't actually tape it down, but then I'll put it in the bag and I'll sign it. So I'll do that signing right now. And I've got more to say on that in just a minute, but I want to show you guys. And then it goes back in the cello bag. So the cello bag is so nice. So let's say you're not selling stuff, but let's say you want to make a painting as a gift, but you want it to look nice. You want to keep it clean and you don't want to frame it for this person. These cello bags are such a nice presentation. Quite often my customers will say to me, should I frame it or what should I do? I'm giving it as a gift. And I'll say, why don't you, the way I will make it for you, it's going to be so presentable, but why don't you give a gift card to the local frame shop, and then you can make a date and you guys can do that activity together where your friend gets to pick the frame, but you've already paid for it for them or some portion of it, but you're still giving them the gift. It doesn't look like handmade or homemade. It looks so nice and professional like this, and it keeps it clean. And it also keeps it from bending. So you've also envisioned, you've shown your friend how it's obviously it's not centered and stuff, but you've shown your friend how it will look when she starts framing it. So I think that's a really nice way to give a gift. So I've got this one here. Before, I used to use my business cards. I would just use a little Avery sticker that I made. You don't have to do that. You can actually just write on the back of it. That's up to you. But just some different ideas of how to make it look finished. So I'll show you over here too. So let's go down. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention another way to prepare for success is to have the right pigments. So if you're painting original paintings, and that's your goal, is not to reproduce them into prints, try to use colors that are permanent, but they're light resistant, they're light and fast. Light, fast colors will last longer. So earth tones last a really long time. A lot of the time we want to paint with like super vivid and bright colors, but they're not necessarily going to last more than a year or so. They will fade over time, even if you use UV plastic or UV glass in your framing, which is important for watercolors. Also, you may recommend to a friend, don't hang this in direct sunlight. It will fade. But if you're making prints, and that's your goal, you know, illustration or something like that, then you can use those vivid colors, because the original and how long it lasts isn't of utmost concern to you. It's more of a concern to get the brightest colors that will reproduce as possible. So I wanted to mention that. For a long time, I struggled to understand, why would people want to use a fading color? Like, I don't get it. Why are they even in existence? And then I realized why. Okay. So I do all of these at home. I do a lot of my framing at home. I did every single one of these at home myself. And it was easier and faster than and definitely cheaper than if I brought it to a store. Okay, so let's go back. When you've painted to a standard frame size or a standard mat size, you can use standard materials. Here's the standard. You can find these lists all over the internet. Make sure if you're looking it up, you're looking up a US standard. European standard, very different. They use centimeters. Centimeters and inches don't equate. The proportions will be the same. You'll have squares, you'll have rectangles, you know, but they will be off, and that's a problem if you're not aware of it. I also added here my own 8x8 inch. That's what you saw in this picture here. And it's becoming a lot more popular. It's like that Instagram size. Everybody likes it. It doesn't take up a ton of wall space. So if you're giving a gift, it's nice to maybe not, you know, take up a lot of real estate on somebody's wall, especially if you don't know them that well, right? Okay, so where do I get my stuff? I order mine directly on Amazon. I order mine on Amazon, or I order directly, usually from one brand called Golden State Art. Love their packaging. They've got wonderful packaging. Everything comes beautifully boxed, and I think everything fell down here while I was talking. So you can get singles, you can get sets. The sets are in all different combinations. This is what you get. You'll get, let's say, 10 or 25 or 50 or 100, whatever you order in, and you'll get the mats. You'll get the backing boards already cut for you, nice and clean. You don't need to do that. And then you'll get these resealable bags. So let me just give you a little tip with these resealable bags. You guys like the idea of putting your work in a bag and keeping it fresh? Okay, so with the resealable bags, some of them come with the tape here, and some of them come with the tape up here, right? I actually find it's better with the tape here. And the reason why is because if I've already reused it and I'm like putting it in and opening this and closing it, then this doesn't hit the sticky part here. I know it's so little, but like, let's say you put it in there and then you forgot to sign it and you have to open
Anna,
it.
I'm just seeing your
You guys can't see me in the little square?
not
Okay.
you now.
Okay.
Thanks.
So see how this is here, the sticky part? I should have gotten
Yes.
a bad one to show you, but okay. So the resealable portion is here, and obviously this isn't the right size mat to go in it, but that's okay. But you fold it closed, and then you realize, oh, I forgot to sign my picture. So you reopen it, and when you take it out, the sticky part is nowhere near your painting. It's on the outside. But if the sticky part happens to be here, which a lot of these cello bags, they don't think it through and they make the sticky part here. When you take it out, it sticks to the back of your picture. So I prefer the stickiness to be on the outer portion, the shorter portion of the envelope. Just better design. It comes up for me like over and over, and then I'm like, oh, it's so annoying. So just something to think about. So you get these sets in bulk, and you can get all different colors, sizes, and also they sell frames. They sell just backing board alone if you still prefer to get your mats somewhere else, or if you happen to have a ton of mats. But the backing boards are cut really nicely. I used to buy my backing board at Michael's. It's always dirty. Like they never have a single clean one that you can buy there. Sorry, Michael's, but it makes me crazy. So I love Golden State art. Okay. Okay, so I always trim my painting like we talked about, and then I attach it to the mat from the back with as little good tape as possible. Don't use Scotch tape. Okay, it's not archival and it will rip things when you're taking it off. Okay, if you want to add a backing board, put a sticker on it, put your business card on it. When I have an original painting, I sign it and date it on the back, because I also sell prints. So that's how I differentiate. It's also how I remember what I've called things. A cello bag, again, keeps it nice. So this is somebody who ordered a commission for me and gave it to her daughter. This is her daughter's 2 dogs. This is it in the cello bag. It looks so pretty. So, and they can frame that on their own now. Before I put things into the mat, before I do that, I always scan the artwork. In fact, quite often I'll scan it before I sign it, and then I will scan it again after I sign it. Sounds like a lot of work, but if you're going to be making mugs or t-shirts or things like that, sometimes the signature gets in the way of the design. So sometimes it's nice to not have the signature on there. So if I scan my artwork and I have an HP printer at home, it is not fancy, and I can only scan up to 8.5 by 11. I can't scan 9 by 12. But it's not fancy, but it makes these prints very decent. It makes, it scans at 300 or 400 DPI, depending what I choose. And that I find to be good for most watercolors. So some watercolors, if you do very pastels, very light washes, it might not pick up on the nuances. But I think you guys can see how nice these came out. And these were done on my own printer. I use an HP printer, so I have HP software. And HP software allows you to do a lot of things. You can make cards, you can scan at different sizes. So you can manipulate the size or the placement on the paper. You can put a 2 up or a 4 up, which is what these were. These were a 4 up, I believe. And then also with that scanned image, I save it in a JPEG and I save it in a PDF file, and I can use those later when I'm making anything else. So some companies will only accept a PDF. Other ones will take JPEG, TIFF, and all sorts of stuff. So always save a PDF because you might need it. And I just changed the name. So I'll say no polis PDF, no polis JPEG. It makes it easy for me to find it. Okay, so we talked about good art paper. So the Arch brand, other good paper, it's European. It's not necessarily, it is not sized to US standards. So Arch is a great example of this. This Arch size happens to be a new one. It's 12 by 12, which is standard, which is great. But they make a lot of landscapes, which I really like, are not, but I really love doing landscapes and I like painting outside. They're not a standard size. By the way, here you can see in the picture is where I didn't iron this paper first, see the shadow from the bubble. That would probably not need to be ironed. When I press it under glass in a frame, I did it, it was fine. But if you're just giving it in a mat and you're not framing it, then you may want to iron it and have that shadow removed. So I love the Arch brand and I love the long format, but when I paint on Arch, I have a custom mat cut to fit the dimensions. I have to, because there's no standard US mat that fits that. So here's an example, but I do have a trick. So my trick is that I try to match the outside dimensions to a standard frame. So the inside dimensions here, and you may or may not like these proportions, it's up to you. I did sell this, so that was great. But here what you have is you have a thicker mat on the top and bottom and thinner on the sides. So that might not be something you like. That might be disturbing to you, but this is like a standard, I believe, 9x12 or 8x10 frame. 9x12, it says it in the picture. So the inside might be custom, but the outside was a standard size. So I go to my framer and I tell him, crop the image as close as you can, but then make the outside of the mat 9x12. So that way I might have to pay $10 for a custom mat, but I can still buy a frame that's standard off the shelf at Michael's. This frame was probably $20. So overall it costs $30 plus change of all the finishing later to frame this up. Much better than if I hadn't thought about making this a standard size. So if I had said, just add 2 inches all around, then it would have become a custom frame job. Does that make sense? Same thing with here. I had these 4 little ones. They were actually painted to the size of a greeting card. I sold a lot of greeting cards when I first made these. However, a greeting card is 4x5. So that would be an 8x10 size, but there's no 4x5 on this. So it'd be 8x10 proportion if it's enlarged. But as a 4x5, you can't get a standard frame, but I decided to put them all together. And then I made the outside standard at 16x20. And I really like how that came out. So I had to go to my framer for that one, obviously. He did a great job. And then, as I mentioned before, sometimes I get the urge to frame like one-offs. And I use the same guidelines. So even if the painting itself is non-standard in size, I will tell the framer where I want to, like I want to go right up to the edge of the paper image, or I want to leave more white. And then I'll tell them what the outside dimensions are going to be. So don't be afraid to frame up things that are like unfinished or smaller works, like they'll still look great. And then there's also another trick is you can reposition or even cut off something that's non-standard and you can have like really fun results. So I'm sure this would have actually fit in the centered into the square, but I thought it was cuter and more unusual to reposition it. But you could do that if you have an issue. As long as it looks good to you, cut off, then that's all that counts. That's all that matters. And then remember, I said, remember to sign your work. So most artists use the lower right-hand corner to sign. But sometimes you've got a dark picture and the lower right-hand corner might not be the best place to sign. The lower left might be better. Somewhere else might be better. Plus you can be kind of cute, like here where I've bent my signature around the design. So it's up to you, your style, where you want to put it. And then here's the age-old question, is to date or not to date your artwork. So I'll mention this now because I know that there are people who are going to be watching this workshop who are getting ready to sort of branch out and start selling their artwork. And they've been told different things. So some artists will tell you that dating your artwork dates your artwork. And that makes it harder to sell because someone might look at it and say, oh, that's old, which is like the silliest concept to me, that something would be less sellable because it's older artwork, but perhaps it's valid. However, in some juried shows that I've been entering lately, some competitions, there is an age limit on what you can submit. They want fresh new artwork that no one's ever seen in their shows. So they might say you can't submit something you've shown before, but they also might say you can't submit something that's more than 2 years old. So you can't just recycle your same old artwork and keep winning prizes from that one thing you painted at the Grand Canyon, 20 years ago. They make you submit new things. And so I always date my artwork. And lately what I've started to do is to date it on the back instead of on the front. So as I've showed you before, I'll put the date and the name of the artwork and my signature on the back. And it also differentiates when I'm doing an art sale, for example, and I've got prints of the piece and I've got the original. And for a lot of people, sometimes even me, I can't tell the difference because I use a really good print quality. So I always use fresh ink in my printer and it looks really good. Sometimes I have to look and be like, okay, which paper has more texture? So sign the front, date the back, put the name on it. And then I keep an Excel list of all of my artwork. As a rule, I always date commissions because they're commemorations. So I always put the date of that commission. There's little Twitter. Isn't she cute? Okay, so before we go on, does anyone have any questions or thoughts? Ginny?
Are you signing in paint or in ink or what, or pencil?
Yeah, sometimes, mostly I sign in pencil, but sometimes I sign in ink. But I usually match my ink, and that's such a good question. I match my ink to the painting. So black sometimes seems like too harsh for me. So I have some different colored brown and gray pens that I use for signing. I also have a red. And sometimes I put the name of what I've done on the artwork visible in the painting. Not always, not everybody wants that. However, when I do an art show, and I've been doing a lot of art shows up in the Eastern Sierra, and everything that I paint that's of that area will sell. So if I bring just basic trees or flowers or anything, some of them might sell, but literally every single painting I bring that's a landmark will sell. So what I found is they want a remembrance. So I will tell them what that remembrance is. I'll put that on there. Okay. So I don't always do that. Sometimes it's not suitable in the picture. So if I can't put it here, I will definitely put it on the back. Definitely. And you guys know my work is semi-abstracted. So it does help me to have sometimes to tell them this is Twin Lakes, not Lake Mary, up in Mammoth. Ginny.
Another question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say you buy arches in a size 9x12, but you want to do an 8x10 painting. So you use your tape to decide where it is. And
I use my mat first, and then I use my tape, and then usually I use that little strip as my swatch paper. Like I don't have to use a separate swatch. Yeah, so I don't trim it before I start painting. I'll use like the side as my swatch.
Okay.
And not just to swatch colors, but for drying time. So for example, when I did these bananas that I have here, I was using Viviva on arches, and I didn't want the what do you call them? The bruises or the spots on the banana to spread so much. So I used the swatch as when I painted the yellow here, immediately I painted a yellow on a swatch. And then instead of testing it and getting it wrong on here for drying time, I tested it right here for drying time. And I knew immediately that's still too wet. So there's like a lot of good reasons for having the same paper be your swatch paper. For color, it'll be the same. For texture, it'll be the same. For drying time, it'll be the same. I know it's so finicky, but those little things make a difference. Yeah, that's a good question, Ginny. All right, any other questions? Louise? You're muted, Louise. I'll ask you to unmute.
Do you pair the side where your swatch off whatever you're gonna?
Yeah.
So you make it kind of in the corner of the.
So for example, if I had been using a bigger paper for this, I'll
Uh-huh.
have the tape down here, and then my swatch will be at the edge of the paper. And then I'll just trim it with my paper trimmer and throw it away usually.
Makes much more sense than using a paper towel for your swatches.
Well, yeah, a paper towel is not going to be true
No,
for
I
color
know.
because a paper towel is not sized.
I
So
know.
the sizing makes a difference for the color because the color spreads out without sizing and it looks more faded. I'm sure you noticed that the color will look brighter or truer when it's on the paper, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, and even which paper you're using. If I'm painting on arches,
Yeah, if you go,
my
I
swatch-
often use a scrap from some other piece of paper. That's probably not the same paper.
yeah, I
Never
mean,
thought of that.
it works, but this is for you advanced folks, so I'm giving you the advanced tips. Yeah.
Uh,
Some people are going to be like, geez, she is really over the top with this stuff, but
No, well, it
those little
saves you work later on. I mean, this is
yeah,
planning ahead saves you work later on. I can see.
yeah, that's the whole point. Trying, yeah, Sarah.
Oh, I was gonna, another question. You said you scan your paintings, which I haven't been doing. I've just been taking iPhone pictures of them, which often are really awful. But when you print them on the printer, I have a photo printer. What kind of paper do you use?
I use, and I have that at the end as well. I use this Staples cardstock. It's white cardstock. It has a linen finish, and it's as close to watercolor paper as I can find for a good price, and that will go through my printer.
And is that a photo? It's a photo paper, right?
No, it's in their specialty paper section where their stationery paper is. Yeah, I used to use this custom linen finish paper that I had to specifically source and they stopped making it. So I had to find something new, but I'm really happy with the new prints. Very, very happy with them. So yeah.
And you have
And
what
go
kind
ahead and buy that paper so they don't stop making it.
Okay.
Let's make it popular again.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try that.
Also, when I do the printing for my HP printer, I have the choice to choose if I want to do a standard print or if I want to do it called
print.
fine, and I always choose fine.
Well, I have a photo printer, but
Mm.
I'll try that. So I can
Okay.
get quite nice prints, but
Yeah, try it because
that's very expensive too.
yeah, and every picture will come up different. So sometimes I'll test it on a piece of copy paper. And if it comes out the way I want it, then I'll put the good paper in there because the good paper costs $1 a sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah?
I
So
believe
what
that.
I'm figuring out that from what I'm listening to, when you take a mat and you trace or put corners where you're going to paint inside, and then you tape down where you are, it would be smarter to put that mat not centered in your main paper, but over a little bit so that when you're matching the colors to the side, you've got a little bit wider of the excess that you're going to cut out
Yes.
so that you can paint. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying, right? And
Yeah, exactly. So here's
and you
here's the
always
example,
cut.
right? If you're doing it here, you block this out and you block it out here, here. So obviously this is a big piece of paper, but let's say you were painting to this size and you blocked it out. Then you've got this whole side. I'm a righty. I've got this whole side to use as my swatch side.
That's great because so many times I cut and I've got the teeny tiny there, and that's just almost useless. But if it's on the paper that you're using and you're getting okay.
Yeah.
Now the
And I
next
almost
thing was
always also trim with a little excess, just because it helps the painting lay flatter and you're taping over the white. Even though it's on this side, you're not taping across the actual painting, which who knows, in 10 years, you could want to remove it and change the mat. And then maybe your tape adhered to it. I don't know. Some people might rip it. So I'm always like thinking about how to make things easier going forward.
well, I've never trimmed my paper down when I've put the mat over it. And so sometimes, so this is brilliant. I didn't know to do that. And now it's going to make my, Thank you. Go
You're
ahead.
welcome. You're welcome. Lee, did you have any question? You guys have really good questions today. I'm sure whoever's watching this tomorrow, on video is going to be very happy.
I learned many years ago to use paper tape. That's gum where you have to wet it on the
Yes,
back. And
paper
just
tape.
put it across the top and let it hang and not.
Yeah, it's such a good seal with the paper tape. My problem is I'm just out of it right now. That gummed paper tape, you're right. The only thing I have to be careful is using water near my finished painting. That's because you can use like a moist sponge is much smarter to do. Okay, so let's talk about framing at home. Saving some time and money with that. Doesn't want to move on me. Let's give it a second. There we go. Okay, so people say, do you ever use a frame shop? I'm not going to lie. I don't do all of my framing at home. In fact, sometimes I take customers with something they've purchased from me and we go to the frame shop together and I help them pick out a very special frame. In this case, you can see it's a linen mat, or linen frame. There isn't actually a mat in here. This gives it a very classical bathroom nudes. Bathroom nudes are big. That's where you're naked the most. So it makes the most sense to have a nude in the bathroom, but you can kind of picture that gallery wall or that very sort of classical home. And this kind of frame is perfect for that. Maybe I would try to find this frame in a charity shop, in a thrift shop. But if I were taking a customer, if I need some special frames, I use Frame Express on 7th Street, and I also use FrameBridge online. FrameBridge, you can't see the quality till it gets to you, but they do a great job. And I actually sell some of my original artwork to them and they hang it in their stores. So I really like working with them. But I like working with a human right there. And I love my Sethi. Seth is the name of the guy who owns Frame Express on 7th Street. The 7 in Eximino. He has, as you can see behind me, a huge selection of frames, all different price points. He's got this burled wood frame that I really like. When I do a show, I want a centerpiece. I want the one that everybody looks at and goes, wow. So I will use a better frame generally for that centerpiece. So my best painting will get the best frame. That makes sense, right? And then I can upcharge for that one.
I know you do.
Okay, I also will use a frame shop for large size mats, so larger than I might want to order through the mail. They don't mail very well, they get bent. For colored mats, such as this one. If I have a multiple mat, like the fish one, special frames, etc. So in this case, I ordered this custom mat. I was able to take the artwork. So someone has a lot of background noise, by the way. You could mute it out, thanks. I was able to take the painting over to the frame shop with me in plastic and match the exact green, the texture, and the size and see what would look the best. So very helpful to do all that in person. The frame, however, is a standard frame. It's like a $40 or $50, frame from Michaels, and it actually is deep, and so it's quite dramatic. So this is the one I'm going to enter in the show in July. You guys have seen that one, I think. Okay. So mostly, though, I am buying or reusing frames that I've found or someone's given me, and I then finish them off at home. There's tons of great resources online. Again, charity shops, you can find frames. Look for a frame, even if it has a picture in it. Now you know, because I'm going to teach you how, that you can take a frame apart and you can rebuild it with your own artwork inside. Okay. I also use this great company called Walls That Speak Custom. It's an Etsy shop that a friend of mine found and told me about. They make custom frames to order, so they're perfect for my landscape size frames. So I don't have to worry about matting this landscape size piece of arches to a standard outside dimension. I just tell the framer, I want a 2-inch mat or a 1.5-inch mat all the way around. And then I measure that, I write that down, and I order that dimension from Walls That Speak. And it comes in about 2.5 or 3 weeks. It comes with a piece of plexiglass and a backing piece of cardboard, which is the nice thickness to make it look nice. And it also comes with a little sawtooth hanger, which I don't generally use those sawtooths. So I do my own D-rings, and I'll show you that, but it's great. They have 10 colors to choose from. They're mostly gray and brown with various degrees of distressing. So here's one that, this is one of the brownish gray. I mean, they're all grays and browns, and there's one white. So, but they're beautiful. A frame like this costs about $39. Not bad, right? And it includes shipping. Okay, as a general rule, I like to go simpler. I find simpler is better. It lets the artwork speak, but sometimes a painting will call for a thicker mat. So something that needs a little bit more drama to it. So this is a bit thicker, this mat. Sometimes it calls for maybe an unusual mat, or maybe you just want to try something new. So this is a really simple, tiny little landscape window, but I decided to put it into an off-center mat. Thought that was really fun. Sometimes you want a double mat. Like in this case, I felt like it needed a double mat. Sometimes you want a fancy frame. So try different things before you commit, and see what works best for you. By committing, I mean buying it or getting it all framed up. Okay, so once I'll show you guys how I frame in just a minute. Once I frame something, I store it. If I'm not selling it right away, I buy these bubble wrap bags. So they're paper on the outside, bubble wrap on the inside. I take the scan or a quick photograph and I print it out and I tape it to the outside of the bag. I'm a visual person. I have a storage unit where I keep all my artwork. It's cheaper than boxes. However, I do reuse the boxes that come with all of my bulk mats. I reuse them because most of the time when I ship my art, if I sell it on Etsy or something, I'm not selling it with the frame. I give people the option, but most people have figured out it's cheaper, or they think it's cheaper to buy their own frame locally than pay for shipping of a frame. So I'll reuse those boxes, and then I'll write the name of the artwork on the outside of the box. Okay, so I'll show you guys how to do your own frame, and then we'll talk about what else, right? All of those prints and stuff. So let me grab one. So I've got one here. So by the way, we talked about taking frames apart. So this is something old I did for someone who then never bought it. But you can, if you find something like this in a charity shop, you can just take the paper backing off. You take the hanger off, just take it off. You can do it carefully, not so carefully, it's up to you. Okay, and then you'll see, even if it is an oil painting, you can reuse it for watercolor. So this person has like taped this in here. I'm just gonna take everything off, and as long as your glass isn't scratched, you're ready to go. If your glass is scratched, you can go to Ace Hardware and you can have them cut you a piece of UV plexi or museum glass if you like. It costs a little more, but it keeps the artwork looking fresh. So all I have to do is actually clean this glass and it'll be fine for me to reuse it. And so don't worry if you don't like the artwork in the frame that you see at Goodwill. If the frame is nice, you can even touch it up a little bit. So I've got touch-up pens in all different colors. I have wood touch-up pens and I've got metallic gold Sharpies. I've got all sorts of stuff. You could even spray paint this with Krylon. You could change the color. There's a million things you could do, right? But the point is don't feel like you can't open a frame up. You totally can. So I'll show you one of mine that I have fully finished, just so you believe me that I do these on my own and what they look like. And if you don't like the look, you don't have to keep going with this. So this is the back of my frame. It has a chip here. I need to take a little Sharpie and just fix that up with the Sharpie. But this is an $8 frame that I bought. And then the backing material probably costs, let's say you're just doing one. and you have to buy all the materials. Well, if it's something small this size, you do not need to buy a roll of paper. You can buy a piece of black construction paper, or any kind of beautiful paper. You can use craft paper. You saw in the other one I just had that had brown paper. So as a standard, it's either brown or black, whatever you like. I do these shows where I have black grids, and one artist hangs on one side of the show and the other uses the other side of the grid. And what you just don't want is you don't want that messy showing through on the other side of someone's grid. So there's a standard that you have to back everything in either black or brown. And I had to figure out how to do it myself. I didn't know how it was done. Nobody told me. So I'll show you guys, but I think that looks really nice. There's nothing different really between this and buying it in a store or getting it done in a frame shop. It's really no different. The frame shop will carry higher quality frame. Sometimes this isn't a great quality frame, but you can get really good quality frames from a charity shop, from online. So for example, and I'm just going to put this back in here so it stays nice and clean. For example, I found this on staples.com, no, on Amazon, sorry. And the way it ships is it ships with 4 pieces of wood. And then you get these little pieces that you hammer in and you build your own frame. And then you just have, if you have a canvas, it slots right in there. And then they give you the hardware so that you can put the backing on, and they give you a hanger. And all you have to do is do that yourself. So just like there's a little piece of cardboard here, you would put your artwork in and then put the cardboard and then put the hardware on to keep it all in place, right? So a canvas will just slot very nicely into there with no glass. If you have a watercolor, you can go buy a thin piece of glass, and then you can, it has to be thin enough so that this will fit the bill, but I just wanted to try it. And I have room for like a 3/8 piece or an 1/8, 2/8 maybe piece of glass in here. And then I would take the plastic off. Obviously, it's a little gaudy for me, and the white is too modern. So I would maybe put a linen frame, but you've got some options, and this is a very high quality wood frame. That was, I think, $30 or $40. Would cost $200 in a shop. So that little square of the rooster would cost $100 at my frame store. So for me, it's much better for me to spend my free time doing it myself, So I'm gonna, do you guys have any questions before I show you how to do one? Okay, so I'll just show you. So
Anne, sorry, I have a question.
yes, please.
So after you tape it, the picture, so in the back, you begin with 4 corners, but after that, do you tape the whole thing?
No.
Oh, you don't?
No, I used to, because I used to not understand that I could iron my paper and make it flat. I don't tape all 4 corners, no, because then removing it is harder. So even if you say gave it to a friend and then they decided they wanted a colored mat, they'd have to remove the tape to change the mat out. And I almost always sell mine with white mats because I feel like people can see it in their own house that way. Whereas if it's colored, they might go, I don't like red. Okay, that's not the point. You could change it, but this is just nice and neutral.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you finish the whole thing, do you put a thin piece of glass in the very front, or some kind of a plastic?
You mean just here in the mat?
Not the mat, after you finish.
In the
framing.
frame. Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you right here. So I've got a frame that has no backing on it. So, most frames come with glass.
Yeah, true.
So what I'm gonna do is take this apart, and first thing I'll do is I will clean the glass, clean it thoroughly. Because once I seal it up, I can't get to the inside of the glass again. And if there's a bug or cat hair or speck or anything, I can't get back there. Also, usually I would sign it. Okay, so I'm gonna assign this one right now. I'm actually just gonna share my screen and I'll show you everything. I'm trying to lift it up and show you as well as I can with as much room. But if I start to go off camera, please just tell me. Okay, so this is not clean on this side, so I'll clean it in just a moment. And then I'll just sign this. That's it, just Anne. And then on the back, it tells me the number of this rooster number 3. It was because I made 4 of them. Okay, so normally I'm going to clean that glass. I'm not going to do it now, but normally I would clean that glass with Windex, and just dry it thoroughly. And then the only thing I've done ahead of time for you guys is that I pre-drilled the holes here for the D-rings. So I don't want to use a sawtooth hanger, so I've taken that off. Okay, I'm going to make a nicer hanger. Sawtooth hangers are fine, but they're harder to hang with because you have to have the nail like right in the exact spot. Whereas if you have a wire with D-rings, it's a lot easier to work with. So I have taken a nail. I just have like a big fat nail. And it is just like this size nail. And I take my hammer and I pre-hammer the holes. And I do that when there's no glass in there, okay? So then I put the glass back in, I put my mat back in, and then I usually do want something extra to stabilize. So I put this back in, okay? And let's see if it will work. I think it's too thick, okay? So by the way, the rule with making the holes is you usually want it to be about 1/3 of the way down. I'm looking for my little ruler. I have a little ruler here. Here it is. So I will measure. I'll measure about maybe 1/2 to 1/3 of the way down, and I'll measure it this side, measure it this side, use my pencil, and then hammer those. They're just pre-holes because this wood can be very dense. So it can be quite hard to just screw screws in. So I'm going to make the holes first. Okay. So then this cardboard is too thick. So I've got some choices. I could just put some paper in there. There's different things I could do, but usually what I do is I like the fatness of the cardboard. So I usually just take a layer of the cardboard off. I'm just literally ripping the cardboard apart to thin it out. Don't tell people how insane I am though. But wait, we're recording, so they'll know. So it doesn't look very nice, but it's nice and secure now. So then the other thing I did is I pre-cut a piece of paper. So I'm going to use black paper for a black frame. I use these rolls and I get them on Amazon, or you can also get them in Michael's or Art Supply Warehouse. And it's just black craft paper on a roll, and you can get different sizes. This roll is about $15. Look how many pictures I can do. However, if you're only doing one picture, just go buy yourself a piece of black construction paper or something along those lines. Construction may be too cheap looking, but buy yourself a piece of black paper. In fact, the paper that you get off the top of the arches board is perfect for something like this. It's a thick black piece of paper and it'll work fine for backing just one thing. So you don't have to spend $15 and buy a whole roll if you're only going to do this once. Okay, and then I pre-cut it, so I've got it about that size. So it's slightly bigger than my picture. Okay, you guys with me?
Yeah, and Anne, the two hole that you are drawing, would you say the position it always like in the middle somewhere, or could it be up and down? Depends.
It is about a halfway up or a half or a third. So it could be here.
Okay.
But no more, not down here.
Okay.
Yeah, and not too high up, because you really want your wire to have enough room to have some give to it, to make the wire shorter or longer if you want to. Because hanging a wire that goes straight across, it's like almost impossible to find the wire when you're trying to find it on the side.
Balance it.
You know, when you're trying to actually do the hanging. Okay, so if this were really rough, you could sandpaper this down. It's fine for our purposes. So the next thing that I have to do is I have to put double-sided tape, not glue. So I'm going to use double-sided tape that will stick the paper down. Okay, so I have this double-sided tape, and again, I've got it's not it's adhering to itself. So I'm going to find where the sticky part is. Here it is. Okay, so see that? There's the sticky part.
Mm.
And then what I'm going to do, and usually I wear my glasses, is put it right up to the edge and stick it down. And I really need to find where I put my scissors because I really need them for this part. So usually, I don't know where I put them. I'll use this instead. So you can either cut square like this, or you can cut it at a bevel. This is up to you, because we're going to fix the corners anyway. So the corners to me have to have the best, most stickiest edge. So I don't want it to go onto the side, but I want that tape to go right up to the edge, and I'll press it, but I'm not going to work on it yet. So then I'm going to go over here and put this beveled edge and line it right up. So again, right up to the edge, as much as you're comfortable with and your eyesight allows for it. And then right up to the other one. So we're going to have a seal that is a nice clean seal all the way around. And then I'm going to do it on this side. So on this side, I lost the tape. So I'll show you the fix for that. So see how I didn't get it all the way up? That's okay. We're going to fix that. And on this one, I'll do a square cut. Doesn't matter, really. And then, I mean, if you were fancy, go ahead and bevel it, but no one's going to see it. It's just about ease of all the details. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to do is to take this off. I don't want this. Don't need it, don't want it. So it's going to get in the way. So here we go. By the way, this says rooster 1. On the inside, it said rooster 3. So now I've got tape here all the way here. Just make sure the edges are down, and I'm going to peel my tape off all the way around. I'm just going to get rid of that without picking up the sticky side of the tape that's underneath. Sometimes it's a little tricky. So just look at what you're doing. Okay, now here we are. So I could see where I need to add tape. So now I add double-sided tape. Could I have done this from the start? And just, if you don't have that other tape, can you use double-sided tape? You absolutely could use double-sided tape all the way along. It is harder to lay it down. So all I'm doing is making sure that my corners have tape, and I'm folding that tape over when I overlap it too much, because I'm not wearing my glasses. I'm just basically filling in the spots that have no tape. Does that make sense? Okay, so now tape everywhere. So now I can make sure your surface is clean, by the way. And what I'm working on here is I'm working on that, what is this called again? There's a name for this. I always forget what it's called. Self-healing cutting mat. I find that a funny name, but it's like a rubber mat that you can cut into. Okay. So, and the other side of it has a grid, by the way, so you could use the grid side if you're comfortable. So now what I want to do is I'm standing this up. I don't know if you guys can tell. I'm standing this up because I want to find the edge. And then I'm going to lay it down flat and just push it. So see, there was a reason why I cut a little bit of extra, because I'm not perfect. So now it looks really nice on the back, doesn't it?
Mm.
And just make sure it's nice and sealed. And now all I have to do is trim it. So I've got a new blade, an X-Acto blade, and it's new, which means it's nice and sharp. It's not going to snag. And then I'm going to stand up And I don't need a ruler because I can just put this right up at the edge of the frame and just slice. And if you do it the first time and it doesn't come out great, just do it again. It just might take the hang of it, to get the hang of it. I mean. So, and then I just rip off that last bit. You can even, oops, I cut right into the frame. So I'll have to show you how to fix that. So I usually wear my glasses when I do this, but it's too hard when I'm filming. I have to toggle. Okay, so let's get that. So nice and sharp. It was too sharp. Look, it cut right into that. So I'll just touch that up with a black Sharpie in a little bit. And you don't need to press really hard because if your knife is nice and sharp, it will do all the work for you. So now I'm just gonna touch up where I scratched the frame. And this frame, I'm reusing it like probably the third time. So because I've used it for different shows. So it was scratched already anyway. So I'm just touching it up. And remember, I think I saw somewhere in the corner it needed a touch up. Sharpie is the best thing for touch-ups. Absolute, hands down, the best. Okay, so that's it. So now we have to just put the hardware on. Also, I will normally take my piece of tape and put my business card on the back. So in order to do that, I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to measure halfway because I want that to be nice and centered. But let me double check. Remember, check twice, cuss once. So I want it to be right in the middle. So this is a 9-inch frame on the outside. And in fact, I need a little more tape so it doesn't curl. I don't want any curling over time. So that means 4.5 is going to be my middle. So I'm going to put the middle of my business card up against the middle of that. Maybe a little high. I don't have a standard, but that's okay. So if you do this and then you realize that your corners weren't down all the way, like they lift a little, you can carefully lift them back and just use a little bit of double stick tape to kind of get in there and clean them up. But if you've done it right, you should be fine. Okay, you could always use these little rings that come with the wire, but I like my paintings to lay flat against the wall. So I use these D-rings. So you can get these from Ace Hardware. These are the small size D-rings. If you have a bigger painting, you might want bigger D-rings. They come with the screws. I don't use these screws. I use a flathead screw that would be around, oh here, that I bought in bulk. So these are flathead Phillips and they are number 8s. So they're just shorter. See how much shorter they are than this screw? I don't want to crack my cheap frame. This frame isn't a good one. So what I'll do is I'll locate where the hole is. If I remembered where I had drilled the hole, I could measure, but I know it's in here somewhere. You can find it. Feel it. It's right there somewhere. Is that it? Usually I find it easier because I've just done it, and so I know exactly where it is. Let's hope it's right here. There we go. I think that's it. Where is it here? So I'm just going to do it again because I usually don't have this kind of trouble doing it. So like I said, usually I know where it is, but I did this one last night and I don't remember where I put it. Okay, so then you take the D-ring and it's flat, and then you take your screwdriver and you just go ahead and screw that in on both sides, and you can go get it nice and tight. And even if you have arthritis and you have bad hands like I do, it's not that hard to do. So go ahead and get it nice and flush and tight. And you don't have to angle this up, but you can if you want, just like a little teeny bit, okay? So let me just, since I couldn't find the hole, let me just make sure. Usually I have a lot more room too, and I can like see what I'm doing. So let me go ahead and just make sure that I've got this in the right place. Also, when you do the screw holes, when you're pre-nailing that hole in, like a bigger nail, it is helpful to don't go too far down. Like you don't want to crack the frame. Cracking the frame is a bad idea. So just do a little hole. You don't need to use a drill or anything like that. You just kind of make a small hole, a shallow hole, and then the screw is generally not going to crack your frame. Not if you have a nice MDF or solid wood frame. So obviously you can't do this with metal frames. That's the only thing you can't do. Okay, so once those are nice and tight, they're nice and even, then you take your wire. So I use, that's not it. I use picture wire. I use 5 pound for these smaller ones. Even for the bigger ones, generally I'm using 5 pound. And so I'm gonna measure it. I need a little extra to wrap it. And then I'll measure it. Like, I don't want it all the way up here because that to me, I don't think looks nice. So usually I'll go about here and then a little bit extra, and then I'll cut it. And again, I don't know where my scissors went. Probably on the floor. And then you wrap it. So you go in and then wrap it and wrap it nice and tightly. So you want this to be nice and secure. And just be careful that you don't poke yourself. Okay. So I had too much. Usually I have less. But if you have less, you can just cut it. Okay. So I'm not going to cut it, but I'm just going to wrap it back in on itself. So have a nice, good, sharp pair of scissors or wire cutter ready. Just have that handy. Okay. And then the last step would be take a piece of, you can use black tape or silver kind of electrical tape. Here it is. I'm trying to find the end. And some shows will require that you do this. Some shows, because they don't want whoever's hanging the show to cut themselves with little frayed bits of wire on everybody's artwork. Because some people are really messy the way they frame things. They do it last minute and they don't think about the person who's hanging it and that they might scratch themselves. So I'm always thinking about the customers. So go ahead and just wrap over that. And it looks nice. It looks nice with silver tape too. Just those are the two colors I use. They're easy to cut. They're easy to get a nice tight little wrap. And this is the exact same thing that they'll do for you at the frame store. There's literally no difference to what you get here and what you got at the frame store. It's the same. And then I'm like saving all of this stuff so that I can reuse my materials. And then I've got these little bumpers that I bought again at Ace Hardware. They're just little clear bumpers. And I usually put them just at the bottom because when you hang something with a hook, the top is going to lean closer to the wall or further from the wall, excuse me. So the little bumpers on the bottom will bump it out a little tiny bit. So now you've got a beautifully framed piece of art. Ta-da, like it's done. You can put a price on it somewhere. Sometimes when I'm feeling super fancy, what I do is I take a hanging hook. Like I have somewhere, here it is. I have a whole bunch of hooks that I bought in bulk. So they're probably in my toolkit, but you know what a hanging hook is? And I'll take a hanging hook and I'll take 2 screws and I'll just put it in a little, I'll put like a little kit for the customer so that they don't have to go buy a hook. And I'll just put it in a little piece of plastic and then I will tape it, literally, like tape it hanging onto here. So they've got a little kit with hanging hardware, and I wish I had one on me right now, but I don't. But, and you can even like cut up one of these cello bags to use for that, or you can use the Ziploc baggie or whatever you want to do to make it look nice. And then whoever you're giving it to doesn't have to go buy hanging hardware. So this is a little too high for me. I don't like it this high. So I'll probably fix it when I find my scissors, and all I have to do is open that up and shorten the wire, just cut it and then rewrap it. And voila, that's it. I would say the cost to frame this was about $15, maybe for the frame, $1 for the mat, because this was a pre-cut mat. And then the wire and all of that, if I were just doing one, it's probably about $30 versus maybe it would cost $100. It's weird, even a small frame will cost $100. So I saved a lot of money. And then if I'm obviously doing them over and over again, I've saved a lot of money because everything comes in packs. So then I can reuse the rest of all of the wire and all of the hardware and so forth. So even the tape and a marker, like all of that is still cheaper than doing it on your own, bringing it into a frame store.
I have a
Question.
question.
Yes.
When you put the tape on the back of the frame, did you use 2 layers of tape? What was the first layer of tape?
So
That-
the first layer, yep, the first layer that I use is this double stick tape in the roll.
Okay.
And then I didn't really do a second layer. I just did filled in the little spaces where it didn't
With
meet
double
so nicely.
double stick tape.
Regular double stick tape from Scotch. Yeah. You could literally do this for the whole thing. Just pull it out and lay it down. It's just harder to get it straight. I find it much easier to get it straight when I use that. I've tried it both ways, but in a pinch, if I were out of this one, I could do the whole thing using double stick tape, and frankly, it costs the same. I've done the math on it.
So you didn't, the second layer you put on was just, you just did the corners.
Just the corners, exactly. Just the little spaces to make, because the corners for me are they have to look the most professional. You don't want them, you don't want the paper curling at all there. So yeah,
Yeah.
little finishing touches. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Okay, let's take a couple minutes then. You guys can still ask me questions, Sarah, but take a couple minutes and talk about beyond the frame. So I hope that helps you. Again, with the framing, you can always frame the back of your paintings in brown craft, or if you want to, if you have a colored frame, you could do a colored paper. You don't have to do black. Okay. So beyond, so I make my prints at home. We talked already, I use that white Staples paper. And I use HP software. So prints, you can also bring them places to make UPS store and so forth, but I like to do them at home. I made these cards in Word. I was so lazy, but I know rudimentary Adobe and I can do certain things. There's tons of programs. Okay. I use an app to make all of my flyers, my posters, my business cards, like all of that. The app is called Canva, C-A-N-V-A. So I made, for example, all 3 of these graphics in about 15 minutes. Super, super easy to use. This for a show I have coming up. I needed a new poster. I used to call myself Anne Kupie Draws. Now I say Anne Kupillas Fine Art, trying to make it myself look a little better. I have to change the name of my website. And my email is going to change soon. So I use Avery labels for pricing and return address and thank you stickers. And there's an Avery app. That's really nice. If you're making Christmas cards, this is a nice way to seal the envelope with your artist signature. Maybe one of your paintings is in the background. So I also use the UPS store when I want to make larger prints. I've made up to 20 by 30 with them, and they enlarge pretty nicely. I'd say my watercolors enlarge to about 3 times the dimensions, and it costs about $8. It's just not a watercolor paper. It gives you a semi-gloss paper. They don't have an option. So if you want to use a finer paper, you can use a print-on-demand service. Like Printful is a print-on-demand service that a lot of people use, and you can make archival paper prints with them. Costs more though. But if you go to Etsy and you see a lot of people selling prints, and they'll sell multiple sizes of prints, you know, you can get it from small to very large. They're using services like Printful. And then I use other print-on-demand services to make all sorts of merchandise. I use Spoonflower to make fabric. I use Shutterfly to make mugs, pins. I use Zazzle to make tote bags and playing cards, and you can get so many fun things. I use Printful for my t-shirts. So I don't use Printful for my prints because I don't sell large prints. Because frankly, I prefer to sell originals these days. Okay. And then here's a list of all of my resources. So happy to send those out to everyone. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I could do a whole seminar on all the print on demand and making the swag and how to make it and stuff, but I feel like this is such a good start. And you know, I work on Saturdays, so I have to get going soon. So thank you. Yep, Sarah, questions?
And you had a tool drawer that probably you've taken things out and been working on, but I'd love to see that again. Is it all unpacked or? Okay.
So I've just now shoved everything on top of it, but I have a tool kit, like a whole toolbox from Stanley, you know, from, I don't know, one of those places. And I just put in the top of it the stuff that the tools that I use for my framing, since I'm doing so much framing in advance of the show. So I basically just keep this stuff, and then in a plastic bag, I have all the tape. So I basically have like a ruler and my screwdrivers and things like that, and my blades, because I don't want to reach in a bag and get cut. But then I just have a plastic bag where I keep all the tape and things like that. All the bumper.
And the list that we saw for 2 seconds, that has those things in it, or?
Yeah, I can add the toolkit, the toolbox to it. But I mean, it's like any toolbox that has a tray would work pretty well, I think.
Well, not the toolbox itself, but all the items that you had in
all
it
of that, yes,
are listed. Oh,
yes,
great.
Absolutely. All of that is listed in there. The last thing I meant to show you is that once I've got this looking great, and I will Windex the front of it again. By the way, spray the Windex on a cloth just in case you don't want it seeping through. But I will find a piece of plastic that actually fits this. And just for now, until I can make a little storage bag up for it, or actually when I sell these, sometimes I will put a whole bunch of them on my table, and I'll sell them in a nice fitted bag, but because I have these bags of all sizes, but I will sell it like this, and that way they don't get dirty or get banged up. So I'll have a whole table of these in June when I'm doing, I'll be at Greenlee Art Space, and I'll be doing the Mid-City Artist Tour. So you guys will see how how I package everything if you come. I hope you'll come.
Well, this has been great, Anne. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
I'm so glad. Hope that it helps you guys and you feel empowered to do some of this stuff that maybe you haven't done on your own. But also different ways that you could use your local framer too. Yeah. Would you guys want my framer's information on the last page? He's wonderful. Would you come to Long Beach for him?
Sure.
Okay, I'll put him in there. So the last thing I'm going to do is put my tip jar into the chat. some of you guys know how to find me. But I'll put that in there, and I'm Anne Kupillas on Venmo. So for anyone who's watching this, it's that easy. I'm just Anne Kupillas. So it's pretty easy to find me.
Could you put your address on that? I wanted to send you a check and
Thank you.
I downloaded Venmo, but it wanted a lot of information. I don't like to.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to do Venmo if you don't want to.
And you said PayPal doesn't work for you, right?
I've got PayPal back. I think I'm Anne Kupillas on PayPal.
Well, why don't you put your pay? I can pay you with PayPal much quicker.
Yeah, well, let me look and see, because I got a new PayPal because I was having a lot of problems with them. So I got a hold of customer service. I have to say, I was very pleased with the customer service. So let me see. Oh, no. So I'm Anne Kupillas. It's same as my email on Venmo.
Anne Kupillas.
And can I do
Anne-
Zelle? Will Zelle still work?
Zelle. Yes, I love
Mm.
Zelle. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then here's my address for those of you guys who don't have it. It's 4712 East 2nd Street, and I'm unit 321. I'll put it in the chat, 90803. It's a mailbox at the UPS store. So we have an insecure mailbox here at the house, so I always have my mail sent there. So I really enjoyed this. I really liked showing you guys how I DIY stuff. It took a while to figure out how to make it look good. I did make mistakes, a lot of them. So hopefully I've avoided some of those for you guys. But you know, it takes a little bit of practice to get your hand steady, to get it to look just right. And the good news is that even if you make a mistake, you can fix it, right?
I really like putting the black paper on the back of the frame. That looks so much better than what you get when you buy these cheap frames.
Yeah, absolutely. Just take off the stand.
Yeah.
You know, because otherwise it might flop around in there, or it might bump it up where it's in the way of it being flush. But I mean, what a nice way to make it look so much nicer.
It looks a lot nicer, I'll say, than what I give people.
Yeah, and it's easy. Oh, the other thing I'll add to the list is I'll add this board. See why I don't use this?
Oh, good.
This
Good.
What is that board? That board is for measuring.
Exacto. It's an Exacto board, and it's
Can you show that again?
Yeah, this is the side I don't use because it's so dirty, but it's got two sides. I don't need the guidelines. That's not necessary for me. I don't even know what these do, but
Oh.
I don't really need to keep things straight. Like if you were cutting, I don't know, maybe you would want this.
Oh, I use old wooden drawing boards that I have hanging around here.
I just like this because it's non-skid. So when I'm cutting on it, if that black paper is sort of slippery, you know, anything slippery, it won't slip and your knife won't slip. So you're not going to cut yourself. You're not going to cut into a piece of artwork, etc.
And for those frames, that's a special size. Now outside, I understand that you want standard size, but inside, it could be different size. So was it there a company that you often use, or can you do it yourself?
The frames, the special size frames, I order them from Walls That Speak Custom, and they're on Etsy, and they're also on Instagram. But it's very easy to order from them on Etsy.
Okay, could you
You tell them what the inside size is. You're going to be telling them what size your mat is. So you're going to tell them this size here, right?
Okay.
Their frames are standard thickness. So what the outside size is, you can't control that. You can only control it by knowing what size is here, and then it's going to be 2 inches thickness on the outside. They have a limited amount of things, but what they do very well.
Okay. Could you send us a link for that company too?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you that tonight with the recording. So I go to work and then I come home, I upload everything to iCloud and put the video on YouTube, and then I'll send you all of that. I'll send it to everybody on the mailing list, so anyone who missed it will have all that too.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank
You're
you.
welcome. Feel free to
Very informative. It was
Thank you,
really nice
Louise.
to see it from start to finish, all the steps you took.
Thank you. And feel free to send me yours. Like if you try out some of these things and they work out, or if they don't, send them to me in an email and let me know. I would love to see them.
See what?
Thanks, Anne. Have
See
fun at
results.
work.
Okay,
when
thanks.
Yeah, see my
when you
result.
DIY.
Bye,
it.
everyone.
Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, get to
Bye.
work. You got to get to work.
Unfortunately.